So good afternoon, morning, or evening, whatever it is, wherever you are in internet land. It's morning here. No, it isn't. It's afternoon, Yvonne. Pay attention to the clock. I'm so sorry. It's afternoon, but it's so sunny here in Binghamton, New York. And we're going to be going out later this afternoon, so the dog will get her walk. She'll be so happy. You know that I complain about Binghamton all the time because I lived in Colorado, and my God, Jack, you have no idea. Colorado has the best weather ever. But Binghamton is wonderful because my grandkids live next door. So it's sunny and nice, kind of cold, but nice. And we're going to enjoy it today. This is Yvonne DeVita at Smart Conversations for Nurturing Big Ideas. And I have a really unique and special guest today, and his name is Jack Buckley. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Let me tell you a little bit about Jack, because this is going to be one of the most fascinating shows I've ever done. And I know you're all going to have a lot of questions. Jack Buckley is a 17-year-old Virginia-based filmmaker who's been making films for over 10 years. Yes, you heard that right. He's 17 and he's been making films for over 10 years. Starting out with short films made with friends and family, he eventually, released his first animated feature film into theaters in 2019 called Remnants. Since then, he's been working on a second movie, an action mystery called Ataka. In his spare time, he likes to play video games with his friend and collaborator, Nick. Hi, Nick. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the film we're going to be discussing today. The Ataka film is an animated movie geared toward ages 8 and up. So one big thing I want people to know is this is a family movie. I mean, that was really one of the things that attracted me to bringing Jack on the show. It's about a young man named Kuro in his journey to become an Ataka knight. It's based partially on whodunits and also on ancient Japanese and samurai culture, which is really fascinating. So Jack, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me again.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Let's first talk about your wonderful filmmaker self at the age of 7.
Sure. Yeah, so when I think it was 7, maybe 8, but somewhere around that vicinity, it was sort of, my parents were just getting the first iPhones, not the first iPhones, but the first ones they got. And so, I always go down or up north with, hanging out with my cousins. And so, we just decided, let's take the phone and let's shoot something and let's make something out of this. And it was this little show that we made called Guild of the Power Souls. And it was just this, we used an app that did some cool visual stuff in it. And, we just really made a little fun show together. And that went on for a few years. But, since then I did a lot of, little small projects with my family. And from then I kept developing until in 2019 I released Remnants.
Well, the fascinating thing to me is, first of all, you had this opportunity because of the iPhone, which my children and myself, of course, we didn't have any of that wonderful stuff, but you took that technology and you learned how to use it. Was it really fascinating to you? And is that something you said, hey, this is really cool. I can learn how to make movies using an iPhone, and then that led you to making these movies you're doing now?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was really great. The compact nature of that sort of thing is just really inventive. But to be honest, I've grown up with cameras my whole life. My dad and mom had a little camcorder, and we film a lot of things. We have like 30 baby movies, like 30 hours of content of us as like 3-4-year-olds. So I really grew up with cameras. So it was kind of a natural progression to go to the iPhone. But the flexibility of it is just really unparalleled.
Well, the interesting thing is that there's so much more to the technology than anyone like myself would know. I put on these little shows and then I process them very simply and quickly. I don't do anything fancy because it's just I don't know how, and I wouldn't even begin to know how. So you've taught yourself a lot of the technology that you need to know?
Well, yes and no. I mean, a lot of it is I played on my mom's phone, so I kind of learned it through that.
Yeah.
Uh, in terms of video editing and stuff like that, it's somewhat self-taught, but in my generation, I guess a lot of us will go to YouTube and those kind of platforms to learn. So I'm not teaching myself everything, but I'm also not going to one particular source to learn the knowledge, I guess.
Right. So, but I mean, have you taken classes in school about it?
Well, in terms of video editing, not particularly. I've taken some film classes which are, more geared towards the history of movies and stuff like that. But in terms of video editing and stuff like that, that hasn't really been something I've done in school.
Well, because then what to some of my viewers who are in my age bracket, and really, I was telling you earlier, some of my guests really don't even know how to use Zoom. And so it's fascinating that in some ways you are self-taught, and you should be proud of that. But is it also something, so for instance, I am a book person. Everybody knows I'm a book coach. I help people write books, blah, blah, blah. Books, reading, and writing came so easy to me. It was like no problem. I never understood all my friends who couldn't pass English because they know how to write a paper. I'm like, what is the problem here? It's so easy. Is it easy for you, the technology?
I would say so, and I think it's honestly because I think every new generation, generally with the technology they grow up with, it comes a lot more naturally. So if you were to go back to I don't know, I'm trying to think, maybe like the 60s, using a newer, or I guess not the 60s, I don't know, with the number phones and the dial phones, I would assume that for people who had been alive for 80 years, the rotary phone was
Well,
somewhat
well,
to use. But
no, I don't think that's it. I think you seem to have a talent for it, number one, and certainly your generation is more tuned to this kind of thing because they're used to having it. But if we look at my generation, even your dad's generation, we grew up with television, but nobody wanted to know how the heck it worked. We just turned it on and it worked, right? Those people who did want to know how it worked went into production and all those kind of technology related, being directors, right? And that's kind of where you are. You're looking at this as a possible career path. Is that right?
yes, definitely.
Well, tell me about that. What do you think when you think of this as a career path? What does it mean to you?
I mean, I really love film and kind of everything that encompasses it. I recently started a YouTube review channel, so I'm really trying to learn a lot about movies. But in terms of my filmmaking goals, for now I'm doing a lot of the creation stuff like screenwriting and directing. But eventually I want to be more in a role of executive producer and maybe and producer, that sort of thing, where I'm more of a creative overhead. Whereas for now, I have to do a lot more of the day-to-day stuff.
Well, I mean, we all have to start somewhere, right? But the day-to-day stuff helps you learn. And when you say executive producer in something like that, tell us what that means. Because honestly, I'll be totally honest. I have no idea what a producer does.
I'll be honest with you, I don't really. It's a very loose term.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, it's a very loose term, and it can mean a lot of different things. For me, I think it's more of someone who is doing the sort of big picture stuff. So in terms of the story, I'm not necessarily looking at the very minute details of, oh, is this guy on set today, or are we having problems with the actors? It's more that I'm making sure that the overall product is turning out right, if that makes sense.
Okay, so when it comes to a movie and we're talking about the overall product, would you think as a producer, this is fascinating, by the way, and I think it's going to be fascinating to a lot of people who have the same questions I do. Would you say then that in your goal to be like a movie producer, executive producer, you're going to be looking at the overall story arc and the overall, not the individual acting per se, but it is, I don't know, I guess I'm kind of trying to figure out, again, what the heck is it? Are you planning in this role you might have in the future? Do you see yourself as being on set every day?
I mean, I think it's probably going to be film to film. It depends on how hands-on the movie would have to be.
Okay.
And there's certainly different capacities of a producer or executive producer. I'm still confused about those, but
I know.
I think I probably would be on set quite a bit. But again, I wouldn't have to. Another thing is, unfortunately, over the past 5 to 10 years, there's been sort of a shift with directors where, if they don't really if they have creative disagreements with the studio, they can easily get taken off the project. And so that's kind of why one of the main reasons I want to be a producer role is so that I'm more of the person who could do that instead of the person who has that done too. So I can just have a little bit more of a vision over the project.
That's really fascinating. That is. And so I want to get into the movie itself in a moment, but movies have really progressed so phenomenally in the last, I'd say, 10 years, where CGI is just out of this world. Where do you see movies going? Part of me says sometimes maybe there won't be actors anymore. We'll just use CGI people.
That honestly might happen in some degree. I mean, honestly, I think in the next 10 years, unfortunately, which I hate, is that we're moving away from the theatrical experience and we're moving a little bit more towards TV, movies, streaming services, and we're moving a little bit more away from theater movies. And you see this now where if a movie has a budget of 70 million or something like that, they tend not to make back their money, and it's really only the really small budget movies and the really high budget movies, the big blockbusters, that are having any success at the box office. So unfortunately, I think it'll probably be much more streaming geared in the next 10 years.
That's interesting. I was hoping you were going to say to me, oh, no, that's never going to happen. That's really fascinating. Well, I don't know. I think that we, the viewing public, spend an awful lot of time when we watch these big blockbuster movies trying to figure out what part of it's CGI and what part of it isn't. And that takes away from the movie experience personally, So let's go on to your movie, Ataka. Tell me how you came up with the title. Tell me kind of a little bit about the plot. And then we're going to show everybody, we're going to show a little clip.
Sure. So I started creating the idea for Ataka, funny enough, the day before I showed my movie Remnants in theaters back in 2019. And it was a very loose concept. I think I just had the idea for a night mystery, KNIGHT. And so from there, it was, I just made a movie, so everyone was telling me, take a break, relax for a while. So, I took a little bit of a break. But then, especially in 2020, I was able to get a lot of stuff done, especially with COVID and quarantine stuff. I was able to focus in a lot and get a lot done on the movie. And then, since then, I've been working a lot with artists, cast stuff, finishing the screenplay, tightening it up. And yeah, that's what's been going on. In terms of the plot, it's about this kid named Kuro. He's 19 years old, and he's he's about to join this sort of elite clan of knights who are kind of the best of the best in this kingdom called Qatari, called the Ataka. And so these knights are just extremely powerful. They don't really have to worry about any threats because they're just that powerful. And so he's kind of on his way to joining them. But along the way, a lot of things happen that I can't really spoil, and some of the things about its kingdom come into question, I guess.
Very fascinating. So He's a male
Yes.
character. Are there any female knights?
There are not female knights, however, there are some very female. There are, well, not very few. There are some prominent female characters. For instance, Toki is her name, and she's in this jungle area of the story. And she's kind of a warrior who is trying to save this jungle area from this corruption that's coming in.
Interesting. Well, I'm very fascinated, very, very fast. Let's show a little clip now, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Sure. Here's a little clip from my movie Ataka. Well, I guess it's not a clip from my movie, but it's a clip of some things related.
Right, right.
All right, let me pull it up. Can you see it? Or a black screen with my mouse moving around.
Yes, I do see
Okay.
that. Mhm.
All right, I'll start playing it.
Hi, my name is Jack Buckley. I'm a 17-year-old filmmaker based in Charlottesville, Virginia. Back in 2019, when I was only 14 years old, I released my first feature film called Remnants, both online and locally in theaters. I also made appearances on TV stations like NBC, CBS, and a 12-minute segment on PBS's Charlottesville Inside Out. And for the last 2 years, I've been hard at work on my second project, my second animated feature film called Ataka. Ataka is a fantasy-based action mystery inspired by some of the great whodunits like Murder on the Orient Express, as well as ancient Japanese and samurai culture. The screenplay for the movie is now complete, and now I'm working with my team to build out the cast, to work on some 3D animation prototypes, as well as to work with my artist on the look of the film. And now we're moving into the very important fundraising phase of the movie. In the fundraising phase, we're looking to get the base amount of money we need to make the movie privately, and then once we do that, we're going to move to sites like Kickstarter and Indiegogo to build some more public investment in the movie. As for the art I was talking about a few moments ago, I want to give you a brief preview of what we're working on. Here's some concept art for the movie done by my brilliant artist, starting with Kuro, the main character of the movie, Kyuzo, his best friend, and the main antagonist of the movie, the Mystery Man. And here's an exclusive sneak preview of some of the early 3D art from the movie, of the main character Kuro, that my team is in progress developing right now. Now briefly, I'd like to take you into a very different segment of the movie that'll hopefully give you a feeling of the vibe of Ataka, the music for the movie done by my amazing composer Cameron Tyndall. Go check it out.
Hey everyone, I'm film composer Cameron Tyndall, and I am super excited to be working on the soundtrack for Mobius Studios' Ataka. This soundtrack will take a lot of inspiration from Japanese music as well as some other Asian culture, but it will also have a hint of trap and EDM. I am working super hard to make this soundtrack the best I can and really bring the world of Ataka to life. And I can't wait until everybody can hear it and watch it. With that being said, here's a preview of some tests I've worked on.
Thank you, Cameron, for the amazing music, and thank you for watching and checking this out. I'd love to talk with you soon. Until then, signing off.
There we go.
That's pretty awesome. That is really, fascinating. I love the music.
Oh man,
Love
you did a
the-
great job.
Yeah, love the music. So how much harder is it to make a movie like this than a movie with real people, do you think?
So in some ways it's easier because you're not having to get all this really expensive camera equipment because with a live action movie you really need a pretty substantial budget to make it look anywhere near an average movie. But with an animated movie, it's a little bit easier in that way because you're not shooting on set. However, you have to create everything in the world for it to exist. So you're having to make all of the characters in for this it's 3D. So you're having to make all the characters in 3D with two-dimensional concept art, which you saw in the video. And then you're having to make all the worlds, and you're just having to develop a lot more of the style. So this gives you a lot more creativity, but it also takes longer in that way.
Sure. And it also, the artwork has to be really spectacular. So
Right.
when we're talking about artwork for a movie like this, do you have to choose really bold colors, or how do you decide? So for instance, his armor, of course, is black. That's what we would expect to see. But the I expected the world that you're creating will have a lot of variations. And how do you do that?
I mean, it's just honestly, it's a lot of texture work and a lot of drawing and kind of designing a lot of things, which is hopefully something I won't have to do a ton. That's something that I'm not an expert in, and that's something I probably won't do. But you have to really hone in all the textures, and if for this kind of movie, you would definitely want to go with a really bold color scheme. When I was choosing the design, I went through maybe 6 or 7 different artists, and it just kind of wasn't working until I found my current artist. And the idea was really to sort of emulate the manga style of it's sort of a Japanese style of drawing,
Okay.
and turn that into a 3D sort of style with my artist's own flair on it.
So what made you choose this particular storyline?
Honestly, it was just almost 2 years of work on it, and it sort of developed from there. I wasn't necessarily where I was thinking, it has to be this way. Just as I was doing some brainstorming, I also talked with my dad, Rocky Buckley, a lot for this movie. I talked to him quite a bit, just talking through a lot of plot points, a lot of logistical things of the screenwriting. I have over, I think, 60 hours of archival audio footage of us just talking about the movie. And so that it sort of just kind of developed. It wasn't that I was necessarily consciously thinking, well, this is actually where I want the story to go. I was kind of developing it as I went and seeing how it turned out.
So you kind of let it unfold in its own way. And honestly, that's really the way most fiction works. People think, well, obviously artists in any genre sit down and make a plan of some sort and have an idea of things, but then the art sometimes takes over the project, and it seems like it might be doing so here also. So where are you now as far as development of the movie? And then I have another question.
Sure. So currently the screenplay for the movie is 100% done, and currently I'm doing 3 things right now. First of all, I'm working with my artists to create the both 2D concept art and the 3D models and kind of the world of Ataka. Second of all, I'm starting to begin doing some casting things, so I'm starting to talk to actors and kind of see who I want to be voicing these parts, because that's very important. And then during both of these things, I'm also starting to go into the fundraising process of the movie, starting to talk to people, and trying to get the film made.
Right, because there's a whole lot more to it than just sitting down writing pretty pictures and trying to upload them and make them into a movie. And where then, once you get moving on all this and you raise the funds, and I have no doubt that you will, where do you want to take the movie? What do you want to happen when the movie comes out?
Well, I mean, I would absolutely love for it to become a pop culture phenomenon and everyone. But honestly, it could be one of 2 things, and I honestly don't know because it's probably 2 years from coming out. But I would say either I'll try to go for a wider theatrical release where it's shown in a good bit of theaters, and try to make a good bit of money that way, Or the other idea is to sell its streaming rights to a streaming service like a Netflix or that sort of streaming service, and have it be playing there, because streaming services are always looking for animated content, especially family appropriate content. And so that's kind of, either of those two options could definitely be viable in the future.
Right. I think the family, and I said earlier, the family-oriented focus of this. When you were, first coming up with the idea, and I mean, it's fascinating to me that you chose Japanese culture. Is there a reason that you did that, as opposed to not making a movie similar to the Crusades and the Knights that went around there, and this being more Japanese focused?
Sure. So honestly, when I was starting to make the movie, it was definitely going to be a little more medieval, a little more European.
Mhm.
And then I started looking up the best knight movies, because I was trying to do some research. And I watched movies by filmmakers like Akira Kurosawa, who made this movie. I made a ton of wonderful movies, but movies like The Seven Samurai, Ron, a lot of those kind of movies. And they're just beautiful movies, and they made me focus a lot more on the samurai idea. And so if you look at the artwork, they definitely are sort of almost half and half between a knight and a samurai. So it's not fully, it's not like the movie is set in a different world, so it's not
Right.
a Japanese movie, but
Mhm.
it's because I just have so much admiration for those filmmakers and the kind of style they brought to it. I just had to bring it to this project. It just fit really well.
So as far as the world that you're creating, tell us a little bit, without revealing any secrets or anything, tell us what it's like to create a whole world, a different world that isn't, that isn't Europe or America or anything like that.
Oh, well, it's a ton of fun, and it's really hard. And so now, I certainly didn't go as complex as like someone like J.R.R. Tolkien, where he made languages and stuff like that. But I built these sort of templates, and they were kind of world building documents where I would just type down an idea for a place, and often I would sort of make locations that never will appear in the movie, but sort of exist. They can exist in reference. Oh, well, I'm gonna go to the mountains here. This tea is from the mountains of Yamatar or whatever.
Right.
That's the place. And so, but they're never actually seen in the movie.
Mhm.
It's sort of a bigger world than you ever see on screen. And so it's very fun to create that sort of thing. It's very fun to let your creativity run wild. But it's also sort of hard to articulate those ideas enough to make it kind of coherent.
Yeah, it is. But will you have like a map that you could kind of show at the beginning of the movie that kind of pinpoints some of these things? I mean, I'm thinking of a lot of fantasy books that I read. In the very front, they'll have a map so that you kind of orient yourself as you're reading. And just so we're perfectly honest here, everyone, I don't maps don't really do it for me. Although Jack, I do sometimes, if I'm reading the book and they mention something, I'll be like, but wait a minute, where is that? And then I will go to the map. Is that something you might do?
So in the movie, I probably won't, just because there's not really necessarily a story reason. There's certainly references like, oh, I have to go up north to this place, or I have to go over here. But if I did do any sort of extra content, that probably would be something I would do. I do have sort of a rough map of where everything is. So if I did for instance, if I on Kickstarter, that could be something like, if you contribute this much, I'll send you a map of the world or whatever it was.
Right. Well, right, exactly. I mean, that could be part of the giveaway, that in the content, the extra, when it's become this pop cultural hit that everybody wants, and all the action figures that will come out of it. Absolutely. But because I do know that a lot of people really like maps, and my husband really likes maps, and they are helpful when you're talking about a whole different world that you don't know, and you have to orient yourself to. So right now you're in the kind of fundraising phase, but in the meantime, what else are you doing?
So I'm currently, in terms of, I'm reaching out to people for the fundraising things, but I'm also, again, I'm doing some casting stuff, and I'm also working with my artists. Those are the main things. Unfortunately, there's only so much I can do before I have at least some funding, but there's certainly quite a bit I can do while the fundraising, because currently, for the past year or so, anything that's sort of been developed in the film has come out of my own pocket, and so there's only as being 17, my pockets aren't that deep, even though I'm doing some work. It's
Right.
sort of, I can develop the casting, I can develop the art as well, but again, I can't do the whole movie prior to funding it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I guess the last question I have is, you said it might be 1 or 2 years, and that sounds like a long time, but it isn't really, is it?
Not for a movie like this, especially with the size of team I have. The window of that we're going to be animating in is actually very short. It's about a year and a half, and so animating 120 minutes of final film over, I guess, 500 days means we have to finish about 12 seconds a day of final animation, and so that's quite a bit, and so we're definitely working on a tighter schedule because I've done it before. I think I know a little bit more about how things go on, because my first movie, Remnants, was also animated, but it takes a lot of work, and but yeah, I'm hoping to get it done either by the end of 2023, start of 2024. But we'll see what happens. It always is sort of up into the air until you get closer to the date.
Yes, I can understand that. So before we go further, tell us a little bit about the first movie, because people will be interested.
Sure, yeah. Well, so first of all, for anybody who's interested, it's on my YouTube channel called Mobius Studios. Mobius, like the Mobius strip. It's on YouTube. It's free because unfortunately it was made using a lot of Minecraft IP. So I can't sell it, so I just decided to release to everybody on YouTube. But it's available there, and it's about this young kid named Chris and his mentor Milo, because his father had died 10 years prior, and so Milo, who was a family friend, took him under his wing. But then this guy named Purple Swordsman, who's this very evil guy, sort of comes back into their life, who was there before. It's kind of hard to explain it without seeing it, but it's an action comedy, and it was a ton of fun to make. And I was, I guess, 14 when it was released, so it's certainly not a perfect movie by any stretch, but it was really fun to make, and I'm definitely still proud of it today.
All right, so I'll make sure everyone has that link to your YouTube channel, and they can visit that, because I'm sure people will be curious about that also. And really, at the age of 14, just to having completed it seems like a pretty monumental task to me. What else do you want people to know before we sign off?
Well, again, I'm making this movie Ataka right now. I'm also doing some movie reviews on my channel called, I guess it's just called Jack Buckley. It might be hard to find, but I'll send you the link. So I'm just growing that, but I'm starting to do some movie reviews as well. But really, right now I'm focusing on this movie Ataka, and I'm really trying to bring it to life as best as possible.
Right, and one of the ways that we're trying to do that, when I say we, because I would really like to help Jack as much as I can, is hoping that if you see this and you know someone who might be interested, for whatever reason, please let us know so that I can get you in contact with Jack, or connect with Jack on your own. Jack will give me all his information. This is really a fascinating story, and not just the movie that you're making, but you, Jack, and what you're working to accomplish, and how you're looking forward to the future, to things that what you might want to be when you grow up. And I know you think you're all grown up now, but you're really not. But still, I'm pretty fascinated by the fact that you're really looking that far in the future and doing things now, right now, to help make that happen. So for anyone, again, anyone watching or listening, Jack would love to connect. The whole goal here is the more connections we can make, the more some of those connections might be purposeful. And in the end, I think when you do your Kickstarter, Indiegogo, whatever you do for the film, a lot of people will want to be part of that. I'm pretty confident.
Well, again, thank you very much for the kind words, and thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
So this is Yvonne DeVita signing off from Smart Conversations for Nurturing Big Ideas, and we were talking to Jack Buckley about his film, Ataka.